Hi everybody, my name is Eric. I'm a co-founder at Hookdeck. In this video, I'll explain how Hookdeck works, and I'll walk you through a quick demo to show you how Hookdeck can help you quickly build, test, and deploy your webhook integration, as well as reliably monitor and manage them at scale. But before we jump in, I'll take 30 seconds to quickly explain how Hookdeck works. So what is Hookdeck? Well, Hookdeck acts as your message queue between the webhook provider and your services. It's our responsibility to ingest everything your webhook provider sends and safely deliver them to you. So what are the benefits of using Hookdeck as your message queue? Well, that's simple. You gain control of your event stream. That means you can set rate limits to specify the delivery pace and avoid spikes. You can even pause webhooks delivery by queuing them up until you decide to unpause. What's interesting is Hookdeck isn't just a queue. You also get the tooling for visibility, such as traceability, logging, and error recovery, alerts and retry. So if I had to recap this, it boils down to Hookdeck helps you enjoy reliable webhooks and a simple to use solution. It means more time for you to spend on building your product, not the infrastructure. So now that we have a better idea of how Hookdeck works, let's jump in the demo. In our demo, I'm going to focus on using Hookdeck's UI, but everything that I mentioned is also doable using the API. So let's start with Webhook Management at scale. Here, I'm in my workspace, and the screen you see is the connections page. This is the page you'll be using to configure Hookdeck by specifying your webhook connections. The connection is the link between your source and destination. A source is where you expect your webhooks to come from, and for each source, Hookdeck will generate a source URL. Hookdeck is a platform agnostic, which means that it works with any webhook provider. You can see there's Stripe, Shopify, and later in the demo, we are going to be adding GitHub webhooks. Then we have a destination, which represents an endpoint and its rate limit. You're telling Hookdeck where you want your webhooks to go and what's the maximum pace it can be delivered at. In our example with Shopify, you can see that I've added Hookdeck's source URL as the callback URL, which would normally be your own endpoints. By doing so, congratulations, you have just successfully offloaded the burden of building and scaling an ingestion service by telling the API provider to send their webhooks to Hookdeck instead. After ingesting the webhooks, Hookdeck will then deliver those webhooks to you in a safe and reliable manner. Okay, so now that you know what's a connection, let's look into managing webhook connections. As you can see, I use the same source URL to subscribe to 2 of my Shopify topics, but I have 3 connections linked to my Shopify source in Hookdeck. What does this mean? Well, first of all, it's important to know that the default behavior when Hookdeck receives a webhook on a source URL is to deliver that webhook to every connection associated to the source. This means your webhook are being fanned out. If you have multiple use cases for the same webhook, or you want the same webhook delivered to multiple endpoints, all you have to do is create new connections. For example, with my Stripe source, I have 2 use cases that uses the exact same webhook, so I create 2 connections. Okay, but if you're using the same source URL for many webhook subscription, like with this Shopify example, I'm assuming you don't want, let's say, your inventory webhooks to reach your order endpoints. This is where Hookdeck comes in by making routing extremely simple. With Hookdeck, you can define criteria to filter and decide what webhooks you want and where will be delivered. You control routing by creating filters for each connection based on the payload of the body, header, query, and or the path. For example, in this connection, I'm receiving webhooks that has store 134 in its query and the /order path on the URL. While in this connection, I specify that I only want webhooks that are less or equal than 1 in inventory and that has a header of product inventory. Something to keep in mind is on top of the routing purposes, the more specific you are with filters, the more relevant the webhooks you are going to receive. This makes working with webhooks at scale much easier. When I specify my inventory level to be equal or less than 1 in this connection, well, 1, I'm not receiving the 99% of webhooks for inventory changes that aren't relevant to me, and 2, it reduces the amount of resources my server needs because it would have been spent using processing the 99% anyways. So the last few details that will help you manage Webhook at scale once you've set up your connection and been receiving Webhook is you can pause delivery of webhooks by connection. This will limit and eliminate the risk of dropping a webhook during downtime. That means that if you are or will have downtime for a destination, simply pause the connection and Hookdeck will queue and hold your webhook until the moment you click unpause. And then we safely deliver the queued up webhook to your destination. In this scenario, setting a rate limit is highly suggested. If you're using a Webhook connection or you're not using Webhook connection in this example, you can archive it. It allows you to focus on relevant information in the connection screen. So just to quickly recap how connection will help you manage webhooks at scale, well, one, you only manage one URL per source because it can be used for multiple subscriptions. Two, you receive all your webhooks safely. Hookdeck takes care of webhook ingestion for you behind the scenes and safely deliver them by taking account your rate limit. And three, you are in control of the how and the what of receiving webhooks. By that I mean routing, filters, pausing, and archiving of connections. Now, let's look at monitoring webhooks at scale. The first thing you want to know when you monitor something is to be alerted when there's an error. In Hookdeck, you can create and customize the alert strategy per connection. It allows you to never miss anything and be able to act on it quickly. For example, I'm going to customize the alert strategy for my subscription creation connection. I'm going to set this to receive an alert every time there's a failure, and I'll set a limit of 1 alert per 30 minutes on this connection. Once you've been alerted of an error, let's go to the dashboard where you can see every webhook that's been delivered to your destinations. The dashboard allows you to get access to information that helps you understand what's happening and troubleshoot errors. For example, you can see the status of your server response, the event date, the header, and the body of the request, and the server response. On top of having all this information, by using filters, you're able to search and find specifically the webhooks you're looking for. Sometimes you want to search for webhooks by date or an event ID in the body, but in our case, I'll take a look at webhooks from the Shopify to no inventory connection with a failed status. Great, we can see our webhooks, and having this visibility is great, but Hookdeck also gives you the ability to recover from errors. For example, we can manually retry any webhooks just like this. Or you can bulk retry based on the filters we've just used. Again, just like this. And you can set an automatic retry strategy per connection. This is what you see right here in the next attempt column. So if we go back to the connections page and select this connection, to create and customize the automatic retry strategy, let's click edit and then let's click retry. Customizing is great for the reason that not all use cases are created equal. For some use cases, you might want to have a strategy with a shorter time interval, and other times you might want with a higher number of maximum count. With Hookdeck, you're able to choose what's best for you. So just to recap how Hookdeck helps you monitor webhooks at scale. 1. You can create alerts to get notified of failures in a timely manner. 2. You have visibility and searchability of all your webhooks to help you troubleshoot. And 3. You can recover from errors much faster with automatic, manual, and bulk retry. After watching how Hookdeck helps you manage and monitor webhooks at scale, you might think it will take a lot of time to set up and get the ball rolling. The truth is, it takes less than 1 minute to get started. And to show you how quick it is, I'll create a new connection on Hookdeck for GitHub webhooks. Then with our new connection, I'll walk you through how Hookdeck can help with building, testing, and deploying Webhook integration faster. So let's get started. The first thing I'll do is to create a connection in Hookdeck. Here, I'll write GitHub for source. Then for my destination, I'll select HTTP endpoints. I'll be explaining what a CLI destination is a bit later in the video. So for my endpoint, I'll be writing the mock destination, and I'll add a path for GitHub. And as for my rule set, I'll select the no rule. Let's click create. Now all I have to do is copy this URL and go into GitHub's to create my webhook. So first, I'll add webhook, then paste the URL. For the content type, I'll select JSON, but Hookdeck supports form URL encoded and XML. Then for my events, I'll click select individual events and click create a branch. Let's scroll down and click add webhook. So let's go back into the dashboard and filter for GitHub. We can see that I received their test webhook. With that, we're done. That's it. We've set up a connection and it took less than a minute. Now let's go through a few things that makes Hookdeck build, test, and deploy webhook integrations faster. The first thing to know is with Hookdeck, you can actually work locally without any live endpoint. So if you're developing on a local server, all you have to do is install the Hookdeck CLI. And to show you how simple what that would look like, I'll show you a quick example. Here, I have my local server running on port 9001. And in the terminal, the first thing I'll do is log into my account. Next, I'll launch the CLI and choose my connection. In our case, it's going to be the GitHub connection. Now, let's go create a branch in GitHub to trigger a webhook. I'm in my repo, and here I'm creating a branch called demo. Let's go back and check our local server. There, as you can see we received it. And if we go back into Hookdeck, first I'll change the view to CLI view. And as you can see here, there's my webhook that was forwarded to my local server with all its relevant information that could help you with building or troubleshooting. So two little details with the Hookdeck CLI, just to clarify how working with your local server works with Hookdeck, is that what we just did is to listen on a live endpoint, which means the webhook was delivered to the endpoint associated with the destination as well as forwarded to my local server. A bit earlier during our setup, I mentioned the CLI destination. So this is the destination type you want to choose if you want to only receive the webhooks to your local server, no live endpoints. The second little detail is historically working with locally with a tunnel meant you can't work on the same endpoints with your teammates because you'll both be receiving each other's webhooks. Well, with Hookdeck, that doesn't really happen because you can simply work by CLI users. And here you can see that you can also look at other users' CLI events if they were connected. What about testing? Is there something more annoying than manually triggering an event every time you want to test? Well, instead of having to re-trigger an event, with Hookdeck you can create a bookmark. So let's take this example. Here I'll save the event as create branch, and once that's done, all you have to do is go into the bookmark page to see all your saved events. Let's replay the create branch event, and here in my local server you see I received the event. The more bookmark you save, the simpler testing becomes. Alright, so let's say you're ready for deployment. Create a connection and pause it. It gives yourself time to add filters, alert, automatic retry, update your destination without stressing about dropping a webhook. And all you have to do once you're done is unpause, and there you go, you're fully deployed without having to touch a line of code. Well, to quickly recap how Hookdeck helps you build, test, and deploy webhooks integration faster, first, you can create a connection in less than a minute. Secondly, you can work on a local server using the Hookdeck CLI. Third, you can test by replaying bookmarked events instead of manually triggering the action every time. And fourth, when you want to deploy, you can pause your webhook connection to safely do the changes for your production setup, and when you're done, just unpause and then you're fully deployed. So there we have it. In this demo, we've started by looking at how Hookdeck helps with managing and monitoring webhooks at scale, and then we did a walkthrough of a setup to illustrate how Hookdeck also helps you build, test, and deploy your webhook integration faster. What you saw today is Hookdeck's effort to deliver a webhook infrastructure that developers can love. But that's only the beginning. We imagine a world where the needless complexities of an async event-based communication are simply abstracted away. setting developers and their teams free to focus on building the things they love rather than the infrastructure around them. I hope the video was helpful. If you want to share your feedback or have questions, leave a comment below. I'll make sure to answer them personally.